Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world today. Welcome to Securing Everything. I am your host, Dawn McCarty. Let's get started with introducing my amazing guest today. I have Dr. Eric Cole with me today. He is an industry recognized expert with 30 years of hands-on experience in the cybersecurity industry. He is the founder and executive at Securing Anchor Consulting. He provides leading edge cybersecurity consulting services, as well as being an expert witness. Dr. Cole has a degree in computer science from New York Institute of Technology, and he received a doctorate at Pace University. He has served as the CTO of McAfee, and he was also the chief scientist for Lockheed Martin. He is a member of the Commission on Cybersecurity for the 44th President of the United States, as well as the Central Intelligence Agency, otherwise known as the CIA, where Dr. Cole received 6 Exceptional Performance Awards, and he also received a Cyber Wingman Award from the United States Air Force. He is the author of several books, including Advanced Persistent Threat, Hackers Beware, Hiding in Plain Sight, The Network Security Bible, Insider Threat, and his latest, Online Danger. Dr. Cole was actually inducted into the Information Security European Hall of Fame in 2014. He has a certification in his CISSP, and he is also the creator of the GIAC certification programs and exams. He has taught and authored many courses at the SANS Institute. He's taught at Georgetown University, the New York Institute of Technology, and has been a guest lecturer at Purdue, MIT, Harvard, and Berkeley. So please join me with a very warm welcome for my guest, Dr. Eric Cole. Thank you for joining Securing Everything today, Dr. Cole.
Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So I had some questions. I want to just kind of start off with, my company is called Securing Everything. You're called Secure Anchor. So it seems like we have a theme of securing things. So what is it? What can we do to secure everything?
To me, what it really comes down to is defining what secure actually means, because a lot of people think secure means 100%. It
Right.
means that bad things will never happen, you will never get compromised, you will never have a breach. And I guess if we want to take that definition of secure everything, then it becomes real easy because we become Amish. We give up technology. We don't do Zoom anymore. We don't do our cell phones, and we do this interview over horse and buggy and candlelight. Right? But that's really the only way to be 100% secure. So to me, when I hear secure everything, what it really comes down to is, what is that acceptable level of risk? And it's asking a question that nobody asks, which is, what is the risk or exposure by doing this? When everybody, whether it's an individual or a business, when they make decisions, they usually ask one question: what is the value or benefit? And if there's a value, if there's a benefit, if something's cool, whether it's putting an Alexa in your house, setting up a new web server, there's always benefits, so we say, let's do it. But what we need to do is ask that second question of what is the risk and exposure, and then say, based on the benefit, is that risk and exposure worth it? And then if we're doing that type of analysis, then we can truly be securing everything to the acceptable level.
Right. Yeah, it's true that it is nearly impossible to have any kind of 100% security level, but by trying to help people secure as much as they can everything in their possession or in their capabilities, because we don't have control over everything, right? So even though we talk about securing things, securing our networks, increasing our security postures, we're only doing what we are, what is possible, we're capable of doing, because there's so much unknown and things progress so much that it's basically just trying to keep up with the ever-ending changes of technology, like you were saying. Unless we go back to the horse and buggy, that's the only way to 100% provide that security. So we have to meet somewhere in the middle of the road. But now we have technology, so we have to do the best that we can.
Exactly. And to me, the other big switch when I hear securing everything is really switching from this preventive mindset to a detective mindset. Because one thing I always say is prevention is ideal, but detection is a must. And to me, where security is failing organizations is not that we can't prevent every attack because that's not possible, but we're not detecting them in a timely manner. I'm
Right.
still shocked today when we hear about breaches of 50, 100 million records and the organization didn't detect it for 2 years or 3 years. And these are companies that are spending $5 to $10 million on security. They have 30 or 40 people, and we're missing the adversary. So to me, when we say secure everything, that means you should be able to detect attacks within 1 to 2 hours when the damage is minimal. Because to me, cybersecurity is about preventing and controlling damage, not never ever getting breached.
Right. Organizations have the money, they have the resources, they have this power of being able to put in the best of the best systems, hire the best to do the work, to run those systems. But like you said, it's still sometimes not enough. And I think sometimes we are missing the basics, where we're forgetting to secure that database. We're forgetting that just because we uploaded it to the cloud, that we're still responsible for that security. And we need to ensure that whoever the service provider is for that, that they're actually in compliance with what our security policies are, or our processes. And we have these gaps where we're letting other people take care of our things. So how are we going to get back to that basic level of understanding and saying, okay, databases need to be secured. You need to password protect them, or you end up with maybe a meow in your database at some point, right?
Yeah. No, and I'm smiling because that's one of my big things that I always say with cybersecurity is back to the basics. That we get so intrigued when we hear about artificial intelligence, technology, and behavioral analytics and all those buzzwords. And I laugh going, wait a second, if you don't know what your critical data is and where it's located, if you don't have asset inventory and configuration management, who cares about anything else? It's those basic things of understanding what your environment is and where the data is. And then I also love the cloud too, because I'm one of those security folks that I actually believe most clients moving to the cloud is more secure than trying to do it themselves. But what I always say is you can outsource security, you can outsource monitoring, you can outsource detection, but you can't outsource liability. Because ultimately, if you're giving it to a third-party cloud provider and your data gets breached, your company is the one in the news, not the cloud provider. So you still have to ask those questions like you mentioned.
Yeah, because ultimately you still own the data, regardless of where it's stored. So you're the steward of that data. Is cybersecurity, it seems the expectations of experts in virtual, the people that work in this arena, it's almost glamorized through Hollywood. So people have an expectation of all of these gadgets and, tips and tools that we like to implement. But it really is basic sometimes, when just some of the simple things, going back to that basic setting. So one of the things that I did want to ask you, and I think it's kind of important for our industry, is what are your top 3 questions when you walk into an organization? And I know I've heard you say that you like to listen first, and then you don't ever make a comment or a statement until you've asked some questions. I think you said 5. So what are your top questions that you think are the most important to ask when you walk into an organization?
When I walk into an organization, it depends on who I initially talk to, whether it's an executive, a CISO, or a security engineer. But the first question I'm always going to ask is, what business are you really in? What is really your business? How do you make money? How do you survive? What allows you to continue to be in existence? And then the second question is, what is success in your business? Is it getting more customers? Is it getting more clients? Is it growing the business? Is it revenue? And notice none of those seem to be security related questions, but what it's going to do is help me understand where their critical data is and what the business processes are. Because depending on who you're talking to, if you go in and start asking security questions like, what is a really bad breach? Or what is your critical data? They won't know that. Yeah. But if you go in and say, what business are you in? What do you consider success? And then that third question is, what would be considered a really bad day?
Yeah.
If this event happened, what would be considered a really bad day? And then ask the follow-up questions on that. And just with those three questions, I now have a good understanding of the business processes, the critical data, and what a worst case scenario breach is. And then from there, I can start to figure out what are the threats to that organization, what are the vulnerabilities, because ultimately that's going to be the risk profile that I'm going to build for them. So I guess those three questions that I would ask right out of the gate is the business, what's considered success and what's considered a really bad day, to start to extract out that key information.
Yeah. So what do they do? What is their goal and what do they want to stay away from? And it's true in talking to a board of directors, they don't always understand what their security needs are. And the language is a little different when you're talking to a board of directors versus a security team. So it's really important to go in and get that understanding without confusing them. So I like your approach on that, because it gives you the information that you need to help formulate the next set of questions I'm sure you're going to be asking as you go through that.
Right. And the key thing is the questions are in their language. Because to me, the two big failures I think security people and chief information security officers made is most of us grew up on the technical side, which is where we're more comfortable. And we like to have technical conversations. The problem is when you're trying to understand and secure a business with executives and key stakeholders, they don't speak that language. No. So it's like you're speaking French, they're speaking English, and you're going to disconnect. So you need to speak their language. To me, the second big mistake that security people and CISOs make is they don't understand the business. Right. If you don't understand the business, you're not going to be successful, because to me, what I've made a lot of success on is treating each business unique. Cookie cutter security doesn't work. A lot of us have a little blueprint. We want to do the same thing for every single organization, and that just doesn't work and doesn't align. And I'm just shocked of how many security people that are creating budgets for organizations and putting together strategy, they've never looked at a single financial statement of the company. If you don't understand how and where the company is making money, how can you determine what the appropriate budget is for security?
Right. And then what's going to protect the pathway to that so that they can have that revenue and profit off of that with the right budget in place. Because if we're spending more money trying to have all the bells and whistles with the security side, is that really protecting what they need so that they can actually make that profit? And that's a good thing to keep in mind as virtual CISOs or even cybersecurity experts.
Exactly. Because I will tell, if you want to impress any executive in a discussion, in the first discussion you have with them, you should just casually bring up saying, okay, I know you probably don't see the direct return on security because it's an overhead function, but let's look at the numbers. Your company is making 50 million in revenue and you're making 20 million in profit. Isn't it worth it to spend 1 million to protect and secure that? Because you don't have to spend that 1 million, but then the probability of you having a breach that cost you 10 million, 50% of your profit base is 70%. And when you start putting those numbers, all of a sudden they start paying attention and recognize that you're doing data-driven decisions and not emotion. Because I find so many CISO people love coming in and being very emotional. You need to spend on security. You don't get it. You don't understand it. The Russians are coming. Whoever's coming, they're going to break it, blah, blah. And most executives don't do good with emotion, so they just shut you down. They just shut you off, and you are completely and totally ineffective.
Right. I've seen situations where we've gone in and talked to the board of directors and asked them to implement certain things. And there is that disconnect where there's, they have one thing in mind, which is the bottom line. And we have the data in mind, which, actually drives their bottom line. But if we're not talking that same language, it's really hard to get them to understand. And I remember my cohort and I had walked in and our decision was, you hired us to do a job. You hired us to give you our expertise. And this may not be the best example for what we should do, but it's what happens quite often, in my opinion, where we walk in and we think we're making complete sense. We need to do this. This makes sense. We have to protect this. And then we don't understand when they say, we'll accept the risk. And, sometimes we walk away with our heads hanging low and we're like, what happened? Why aren't they listening to me? Why do I feel undervalued now? I can't accomplish anything. So this really kind of sets in that motion where it's almost a derailment on a personal level for the cybersecurity side and then the board of directors. So what I think you're talking about and how we can level up that communication where they can understand that pain point. Like, we didn't point out that, well, it's only going to cost you $1 million to protect 20 million. That's something that we need to start. The cybersecurity professionals need to step up and have that information so that they can provide that. They need to do their homework before they get in front of the board of directors.
You just nailed it, is we have to do the homework. And many times we're never given the homework assignment, because most security people were never told they need to do that. So we're walking into class thinking we're doing great, not realizing that the homework assignment was written on the board after we left, and we're showing up without any work done, and that's going to set us up to make it much harder to succeed.
Right. There's different mindsets on what cybersecurity kind of really is capable of doing and what they actually do.
And it's funny you say that, because I was working with a company a month or two ago, and I had that conversation with the security team. I'm like, listen, you need to stop spending all this energy on researching the dark web and setting up honeypots and doing all that stuff. I said, and you need to be spending 90% of your time on asset inventory and configuration management. And I remember the 3-person team, they looked at me and said, Eric, that's boring. We don't like doing that. We'd rather work with the threats and track the adversary, track the attackers. And I'm like, you are doing your company a disservice. I said, You're not being paid for cool stuff. You're being paid to deliver service, and you're not doing what you're supposed to. You can imagine I wasn't too popular with them, but you're right. It's sometimes the boring, simple stuff that has to be done that a lot of people don't want to do. And that's why it doesn't get done. And that's why companies get exposed.
Well, and the boring should be your priority. Do this first. Then once that's done and you know that you have everything configured the best way possible and you've really gone through that asset inventory and not forgetting that one database sitting out there, that you really know what's in your environment, that you've protected it the best you can. And then you could go and dive into your SIM or, go play some, DFIR type, looking at these incidents and seeing what you can come up with. But it isn't a recreation. It's not a hobby. It's your responsibility to protect your business, your organization's data.
Exactly.
Yeah. So let's go on. One of the questions that I had is how, in this new era of working from home post-COVID, or we're still in the midst of COVID, but COVID really has kind of scattered us all home. Now we're working in these environments that are really unknown to corporate America and unknown to a lot of our cyber experts. So what is it that we can do? How is it affecting the security that we see now?
To me, it has several effects. One is the amount of attacks we've seen have increased significantly, because when you look at the targeting of the attackers, what they really like is anytime they can get somebody emotional and fearful. Right. Because if you're emotional and fearful and we can tailor an email correctly, you're more likely to click on it and do illogical things to make it happen. I think if there's any words we can use to describe the last 6 months, it's fearful and irrational and emotional. So people are going to click. So we're seeing all these emails coming in, and I'll tell you, if you send an email to somebody that has the subject line, coworker tested positive for COVID, and then the body says one of your coworkers that you potentially have been in contact with tested positive for COVID, find out who they are to see whether you need to be quarantined. 80% of the population is clicking and opening that attachment. So we're in a more exposed state. And then to make it worse, we've basically taken our security architecture and burnt it to the ground. Most security architecture for clients was based on 3 fundamental principles. First, that you were connected behind a secure architecture. So you were in an office behind firewalls, IDSs, IPSs, monitoring, and SIM,
Yeah.
and you had that infrastructure in place. Well, as soon as employees work at home, that's gone. So
Right.
that's problem one. Problem two is that we gave you a secure laptop. We gave you a secure lockdown system that is trusted, verified, and validated. Well, a lot of companies, when their employees work from home, said, well, just use whatever you have, because their desktop, or in some cases, people went home on a Thursday and they never returned. So their laptop was left in the office. So they're like, just use whatever you have at home. Well, let's face it, your home network isn't set up to run a business. People have wireless. They have their password as goldfish or something silly because it's not secure. Some people still have Windows 7 computers with no endpoint security. So that creates the second big exposure point. And then the third one is most data in a corporation was internal on private systems. Well, now all of a sudden that you had to work from home, companies very quickly took these servers, gave them public IP addresses, and put them out there. So now with all those factors,
on the other side,
we have to redesign everything. And to me, what we're doing with a lot of our clients is, and I know a lot of security people are against the cloud, but to me, if it's done correctly, the cloud has a much higher level of protection and potential than internal. So to me, you need to look at moving more of your data and services to the cloud so they can be protected, secured, and locked down. And then the other one is on the endpoint, we're really going back, in my opinion, to thin clients. Because if people are going to be working from home, we don't want them to have portable servers in their house. Because let's face it, a laptop that has quad processor, 16 gig of memory, and a 4 terabyte hard drive, that's a server. Nobody should be storing 4 terabytes of corporate personal data on their home computer. So we need to go in and get rid of that. We need to start, if you're going to work from home, we'll give you a processor, we'll give you a thin client, but you're not storing anything at home. Everything has to be stored in a centralized cloud that we can protect, control, and manage.
Yeah, I agree with that 100% because my background is in data security, data in motion, data at rest, data in use. And I can't tell you how much protected data ends up on the C drive. And in the efforts of trying to get people to move it off, I would love to see thin clients coming back in where, it would eliminate that job almost. So that's not a good thing. However, at least the data is safe. And then like you said, with the cloud services, it's scary to put your company's data out there on somebody else's computers or somebody else's infrastructure. However, at least it's in a secure state, more so than the company taking that rash decision of moving an internal server outside of your firewall network security. And now it's vulnerable because you didn't reconfigure it. So yeah, I mean, the cloud, it might be scary, but it's also probably your best choices at this point. So I agree with that also.
And to me, the COVID and the working from home and all the changes, to me, this is really going to be separating out security professionals. Because when I always look at security professionals, I always put them in two groups. One group are the ones that have to have control and find fault with everything. And those are the ones that when you propose a solution, they are masterful at saying, oh, but it has this vulnerability, this. They always want to point out what's wrong and have total control versus the security professionals that recognize there's no such thing as a 100% perfect solution. And you have to give up control and recognize acceptable risk and minimize it to that acceptable risk level. Because now that people are working from home and remotely, this idea of controlling and criticizing is not going to work. I'll tell you right now, executives have no patience for that because they want solutions, not problems. So if you're one of those security professionals that always like pointing out the problems, you need to adapt and adjust very, very quickly if you want to survive, because in this new remote workforce, companies are going to pay a lot of money for security professionals that can give them acceptable solutions. If you go in and start telling them everything that's wrong, they're going to be like, why am I paying you to tell me my problems? I want to pay you for solutions and to fix the problem.
Yeah, and that's a good point, is if you're going to point out the problem, always go with the solution in mind. And probably have several options, because that one may not be something they're willing. So if you give them options, at least, then they have something to work with. And they understand when you're talking to them and you're bringing them the problem with solutions, they understand more that you're understanding their needs as well. And that helps that communication.
Exactly. And the only thing I would add to that is the security professionals that are really going to shine in the next couple of years are not only the ones that are solution, but that are root cause based. So a lot of times we'll come up with solutions that are fixing the symptom of the problem. And then that's okay short term, but you're still going to have breaches long term. But if you can go in and say root cause analysis, what is the fundamental root cause of why this is happening, and create that solution, that's when you start becoming a difference.
Because you're putting that stop in there.
Yeah.
Just had a conversation the other day, and the comment that I made kind of stunned the virtual room because we weren't really in a room. But I said, we are no longer the Department of No. We've been known for so long as being the Department of No, but we have to evolve beyond that because, so we cannot control security to that degree. And, maybe a decade or 2 decades ago, it was a little easier because you had the one man with the several different hats on. Yeah. Now we have teams, and they're segregated into so many different niches or silos in cybersecurity that it's not a one-man band anymore. You really have to have experts in every area helping to secure the data, or secure your network, secure everything, more or less. So by saying no, what you're really saying is you're closing off your mind onto other opportunities. So because of that expansion, because of that need to grow and evolve out of the Department of No and be in the Department of Solutions.
Yeah. That's spot on, and we are so aligned with that. And to me, there's another issue there too, because if you're the Department of No, not only is that locking up your creativity, but if you tell somebody no in this day and age, all they're going to do is do it anyway and leave you out of the meetings. So all No is saying is do it behind my back and create more problems for me. So I know when I'm training CISOs up and working with companies, I drive the security team crazy because I'll sit in a meeting and somebody will say, oh yeah, we want to do the craziest thing. We want to take all of our corporate data and we want to put it out on the internet, accessible to anybody, available anywhere in the world. Can we make that secure? Of course we can. Now, these are going to be the risks that you're going to have to accept. And we're going to go to the board of directors and tell them that you've accepted these risks, and this is the amount of money you have to spend, and these are the things you need to do, and we'll give you multiple solutions and multiple options because you can always do it. But now what we're doing is we're pushing the risk back on them, where they now have to accept and sign off, and that's a different mindset, because the way most companies run is the business units have all the authority, but security has all the responsibility. I remember one of our clients, the security team, and I mean, a great example of that is the Marriott breach. The CISO at Marriott was screaming and yelling for a year and a half saying, we need to take these servers offline. It was from an acquisition. They weren't being used. We need to keep them online. And the business unit basically said, nah, we still want it there as a backup. We still want it there as a backup. They didn't listen to the CISO. And when the breach happened, the CISO got fired, and the VP that didn't listen to the CISO got promoted. What the heck? I mean, that is just messed up on any way. And the problem is, it's really our fault because we allowed that to happen. So what I like to do is go in that situation, I would have said, okay, this is, in my opinion, unacceptable risk, and I've given you solutions that you're ignoring. We're going to go to the executive team and make them aware. I'm going to tell them that I believe this to be an unacceptable risk, and here's why, and this could lead to a significant breach. You're saying no, you're accepting the risk, and I'm going to transfer that risk to you and make the entire executive board aware of it. And I believe if that was done, they would have either fixed it or the outcome would have been different. Yep.
Because it's true. If a breach happens and you're in that position, your name is, tagged forever after that. And, try finding a job after you're responsible for such a big breach like Marriott and some of these other ones, that would be hard. So one of the questions that we asked the board is like, look, I brought you 6 different viable plans, and I just would like you to select one. Yeah. Just one. Help me with one of these. And, and that was before the mindset of knowing, there's that disconnect in the communication. But when you're in that seat, that's your job, is to bring the solutions. and then give them the reasons why they need to select at least that one and make it so that they can understand it. Point out that pain where if this happens, this could potentially cost the company massive reputation damage or anything else that happened for a lot of these organizations at that point.
Exactly, but you were spot on. Give them options and let them pick. Don't keep it open-ended.
Yeah, let it be their choice. So like you said, you're putting it back on the business unit, but when you take that to the board of directors, now all of a sudden it's the board of directors' choice. Yeah. And you've covered your basis and you've covered you did your CYA. So why does the world need more virtual CISOs? And for our audience and our viewers, virtual CISOs is a virtual chief information security officer, an executive level that's like the liaison between security and the board of directors.
So I'll address why do they need CISOs first, and then I'll add the V in part after. To me, companies need a security strategy. When you look at what's happening in the world, the breaches, the compromises, and one thing I know you're aware of, but for the audience, the amount of breaches have increased significantly, and the amount of damage has increased significantly. The problem is, with where we are in the world right now, the media does not believe that to be as significant. With all the other, with the election and the COVID and all the other crazy things going on in the world, you do not see the media cover breaches. I do a lot of interviews, and in the last 3 to 4 months, it's almost gone dry because they just don't care about security anymore. So if you're relying on the news to determine the breaches in security, you're getting a very inaccurate view of that. The problem is getting a lot worse, and it's going to explode if we don't get a handle on it. And the fundamental reason is companies don't have a security strategy. What you have in most companies is the executive team takes a bunch of money and throws it at a bunch of technical folks. And the technical folks run off, and they're brilliant, they're really smart, and they buy a bunch of stuff, but there's a disconnect. There's tactical and there's a budget, but there's no strategy
that
operational links the two together. And without a clear, focused strategy, there's no way to be successful. So to me, that's why companies need a chief information security officer. The reason why they need a virtual one is the way things are evolving now is the CISO in most companies is not a full-time role. Because what most companies have decided is security should not be buried under IT, because that's a conflict. That was a 5-year battle of mine, and I finally won that, where people are agreeing and convinced that's not the case. But all the technical staff most likely is going to reside under IT. So really, if you look at it, you have a CIO that has a staff that does all the tactical implementation, and you have a CISO that does strategy, and then that strategy gets implemented by most of the engineers that are under IT. So you're not going to have a big staff or a big team. And even a $400 or $500 million company, once the strategy is there and overseeing it and the metrics are in place, that might be something where it's 4 to 5 hours a week, not 40 to 50 hours a week. So you need somebody who's aware of the company, building out the strategy, monitoring the strategy, and making the execs aware, but not full-time, thus the virtual piece. So this way they can be having 5 or 6 different clients helping you, and now it becomes a cost that the company can absorb because you're not paying a full-time employee, you're just paying a part-time CISO to help you out with that strategy.
So you're kind of balancing it between other organizations as well, because it's a costly position to have someone permanent or full-time to bring on board.
Exactly. And the other magical thing of the vCISO is you now bring a broader perspective to that company, because we're working with a healthcare company, and what they love about our vCISO is we also do work for 7 other healthcare companies. So now when I'm coming in, I'm not just siloed to their business, because that's one of the problems. If you've had a CISO that's full-time in a company and worked there for 7 years, they know that business great, but they don't know anything else. They don't know what other entities are doing.
You need a fresh set of eyes.
Exactly. So now with a vCISO, when we come in, like you said, not only do I give the board of directors those 5 options, but I can go in and say, okay, here's the 5 options. This option is what 3 other hospitals of your size is doing. This option is what 2 others, and these 2, no other hospitals are doing it. And let me explain why. I want to give you the option, but here's the drawback that we learned from other hospitals. So now with that CISO, I am bringing so much other knowledge to them of what other entities in that industry is doing that it just provides so much more value.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. I've worked for a small chain hospital, and I've seen where they're so closed in. They don't have anybody coming from the outside, and they just move people from one position to another from the internal pool of people. So instead of bringing in a new set of eyes, someone that's worked in the industry in another location, maybe even a bigger hospital, they're not taking advantage of finding those outside resources. And I think that's very detrimental to any organization to continue only to keep things internal. And they need to bring in the external perspective, more or less.
Yeah. And to me, it's sort of like anything in life. If you want to figure something out, you have 2 options. Option 1 is you can take the straight road and make all the mistakes yourself, learn all the hard lessons, get all the bruises, get all the cuts, or you can find somebody who's already made the mistakes and learn from them. And to me, that's really the CISO is we've already been down this path with other clients. So you can hire somebody and have them make all the mistakes, or you can hire us and we can show you how to avoid all the mistakes.
Well, and you're sharing those lessons learned, which is very valuable. That's a lot of value that, okay, this hospital ended up, even with like ransomware is big for hospitals or healthcare industries, right? So when one has a situation and you do that root cause analysis and you figure out what happened and you find solutions, now all of a sudden you have a package that you can share with all of the others. And that's a massive value right there.
Yeah. I always give the example with our clients is a doctor is a doctor or a pilot is a pilot. But if you're getting on an airplane, do you want the pilot that this is their first flight or this is their 500th flight? And if you're going into the hospital and getting operated on, do you want the doctor that this is the first time they're performing the surgery or this is the 400th time they're performing the surgery? Experience matters in every area of life, but we tend to forget that when it comes to cybersecurity.
Absolutely. You know, and we were talking about breaches and stuff earlier. I read an article recently that 2020, because of the environment that we're in, all of a sudden is poised to be the worst for data breaches in history. Of course, you know, we haven't had internet for very long in perspective to history. However, if it's going to be the worst, there's a lot of need for more experts and more security. So what are some of our biggest dangers for the organizations right now, small businesses and even the remote workers? I know we talked about a little bit earlier, but as far as what the virtual CISO can provide, what are some of our biggest dangers that we're looking at and we're faced with?
Yeah. And with that note, I definitely agree that not only is it going to be the biggest year of breaches, but what really terrifies me the most, and this is an informal survey because this is proprietary data from my clients, the number of companies that I've seen that are paying ransoms and with ransomware and other factors in 2020 is off the charts.
Wow.
Like I would say in 2019, out of the hundreds of clients that we work with, I knew 3 that paid the ransom because they felt it was easy and simple. So far this year, we're only 3/4 of the way through. I know at least 53 companies that when they got hit with ransomware, they just paid the ransom. They just paid it right out of the gate. Now, the interesting part is they got their data recovered very quickly. So they felt that it was a success. But my point is, okay, an adversary got into your network. They had control of your data. They could have planted backdoors and you had vulnerabilities. What did you do to fix all of those? And when I do that, it's like deer in the headlights. They're like, but we paid the ransom and got our data back. I'm like, yeah, but you didn't.
What else did you do?
You didn't fix the, and that's the issue is they're going for the short term. Basically, I call it the painkiller security, where they're just popping some Percocet and saying, life is good, the pain went away. I'm like, no, whatever was wrong is still there. You're just masking it and not paying attention to it.
Or maybe you got some freebies you're not even aware of, which reminds me of something when I worked for the government. they had an actual system that I thought was strange at first. But now looking back at it, we're talking, years later, I'm looking back at that model, and I actually think that that's probably a better model where IT does IT. And then you have a cybersecurity team that does that operational, technical, and they kind of interact with the organization as a whole. And I think that centralizing the cyber side of things, where the security is being evaluated meticulously, where they're not only looking at, before anything is put onto their system, it has to go through their scrutiny. Where a lot of people in IT, organizations that I've worked for since then, kind of have a Russian roulette, like this team's doing that, this team's doing that, but nobody's really talking. So you end up with similar types of applications, or you're actually buying the same things to do the same things, but in two different aspects. And it's costly, it's hemorrhaging money. But what I like about what the department was doing is that they centralized cyber, so that everything went through cyber, and then everybody in the organization knew this is what we're working on. We're working on, maybe password managers. We're working on trying to do a DLP type system, or data loss prevention, where we're scanning the endpoints. So everything is known now because it's in one centralized location. So that kind of I know we kind of went off track there with that, but I think that's an important thing to consider, that somebody has to know what's going on the organizational side as well as the IT side.
Yeah. And when you're pushing at, which is spot on, is security is not just a checking the box where, okay, we have a security department, or we have a CISO, we have a strategy. It's really one of the main streams of the company, and they need to be involved with all decisions.
Yeah.
When new projects are getting launched, when budgets are getting reallocated, I would even say in some cases with key hiring positions, cybersecurity needs to be involved in that process, because one mishire, one acquisition, one project in which not aligned with security that has a major vulnerability could not only cause significant risk, but could put the company out of business.
Well, and that includes even the EULA, the end user license agreements. If they're not being gone through with a fine-tooth comb, you may actually allow an application development or an organization a backdoor to come in and I'm going to take some data just so that we can improve our product. Whatever their reason is, you're allowing them access into how you're using it in your environment. And if somebody is not going through things to that degree, which most IT people are not doing, then that poses a huge vulnerability going forward, where now somebody could be looking at your data and you're not even realizing when they're doing it and what they're doing with that information once they've taken it.
And that's so true with contracts. If you're going in and signing any contracts, security or somebody from security or a cyber attorney needs to be involved in reviewing that, because there's a lot of language in there that people don't realize. And to me, the funniest example, because it's ironic, is cybersecurity insurance. Most companies that we do work for have a cyber insurance policy, yet no one from security or security mindset actually read it, which means you're paying the premium, but it will never pay out.
And that's a false sense of security. It's a false sense of security.
Exactly, because there's language in there. Like the one I always point out is almost every cyber insurance policy I've ever seen, there's a clause that says any critical patch must be applied within 90 days on every server. Now, I think we could both agree at any company, that's not true. You can always find some server that is in some closet that's 3 years old that doesn't have the patch applied. Yeah. And that's the issue, is the way the language is written is in favor of the insurance company, which guarantees there's always loopholes. So you're essentially throwing your money away with most cyber insurance policies.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And then if you don't comply to one little phrase, like if you didn't do this within 24 hours, because sometimes it's a 24-hour thing, then you more or less null and voided your contract. So you don't even know, you're still paying this premium, but you null and voided it 3 months ago. So it's no longer viable. And I've seen, just a funny side note is, we had a server that nobody knew where it was. We saw it showing up in our logs, and we're like, where the heck is this server? And we'd walk and walk, and we would check everything. We went to the server room. We went through the entire building, and we could not find this server. We knew it was on the network, but we could not find its physical location. And then one day they decided to redo a whole area, remodel. And so they tore out one of the internal walls. Somebody had built a wall around it. It was like in a closet with no access. All it had was an electrical outlet, a modem. So it was even all by itself. And thank goodness it never went down, because it happened to be the payroll server that was built. It was closed in this wall. So knowing your assets and where they're at is definitely important to know. Okay, so one of the other questions, we've talked about the virtual CISOs and the value and the need. So how blue is this ocean, and how can we attract more CISOs and more cybersecurity experts into our job force? Because I know we have a huge shortage.
To me, based on the size of the ocean and the amount of need that's out there, it is still very, very blue. And the reason it is because, and some people might get mad at me for saying this, most people in CISO roles today are not actually CISOs. It's like me going in and wearing a shirt that says, I'm an NFL quarterback. I think we can agree that that's not one of my career options, right? So I always joke, it's like you can put whatever title you want on your business card, but that doesn't make you that person if you don't have the skills and the mindset that's out there. So to me, most CISOs are more of a figurehead as opposed to really a cybersecurity strategic leader. And that's why you're seeing such high turnover, because companies are getting frustrated because they're not getting that strategic plan. So if we define CISO as a strategist that can speak both languages, business and security, and can create a strategic plan with a clear roadmap that has definable metrics that the security team can deliver on and the executives and management understand, I would say there's very, very few people in that ocean, which makes it very, very blue. And then what I always tell people and encourage them is, yes, in 3 to 5 years, it's going to get a little bloodier and red ocean, but you always want to look at the leading example, the category kings like Amazon. Online e-commerce is a red ocean today, but because Amazon got started when it was blue, and they became the category king, they own that space. So that's really the trick, is if you get in early, and that's, I'm not hiding anything here, but that's my goal, is to be the category king of these CISOs. So when it starts growing, getting bigger, we own that category already, and we're there and effective in that space. So yes, I mean, there's tons of opportunity, but the trick is, don't give yourself the title, work on the skills and earn the title. And that's how you're really going to be able to own that space.
Yeah. Yep. Sounds like a solution to a problem.
Yes.
Okay. And so now you talked about the businesses out there right now as we see it, but we're going through COVID right now, and there's a lot of companies that are distressed. There's a lot of cyber companies that may also be distressed. How are they functioning, and how can we salvage distressed cyber businesses?
So this might sound, and I'm filtering it first in my head, because one thing I'm accused of is being very, very direct and honest. So I don't want this to come out to sound too cruel, but the first part is, if we're just honest with each other, there are a lot of people that started cybersecurity businesses that had no business starting cybersecurity, because cybersecurity became such a hot area that everybody got into the space, and companies were so desperate that anybody that came in and said they're a cybersecurity expert, they trusted them and they believed them, when in reality they really weren't experts. They really didn't have the expertise or any business. So on the one hand, I think that the COVID is going to be doing a little bit of a weeding out, where people that shouldn't have been running and providing services are going to no longer be in that business because they didn't provide good, valuable service. In my opinion, if you're providing valuable service and customers are getting value, it doesn't matter if it's good or bad economy. It doesn't matter if it's up or down, you're still going to be okay. But one of the big things is the ability to reassess, reevaluate, and reinvent yourself. And that's one thing we're actively doing with Secure Anchor, because most of our business was in person. I did in-person training, I did in-person coaching, I did in-person assessments. Everything involved me traveling on an airplane and meeting face-to-face with people, and that pretty much stopped. So that's one of the ones why I believe in teaching and helping, that I'm doing the CISO, that we're doing virtual assessments now, we're doing redesigned architectures, and we're really reinventing the business. But that's not getting too much into business advice, but that's one of the big things with a business is you want to make sure you always have a runway. One thing I always do when I run my business is I can always cover all my expenses and payroll for 9 months. Yeah. So if the business stopped at any point in time, you could always carry for 9 months. And before I hire an employee, before I bring on any expense, I always make sure that that runway is there. So now when something like COVID hits and you don't have business that was planned, or you have a month or two, you actually can have the room to step back for a month and say, okay, let's brainstorm, let's reinvent, and let's come out stronger than before.
Right.
Because I believe any company that is given a couple of months can always reinvent themselves. The problem is if you don't have the money to cover for 3 months, that's when you panic. That's when you make rash decisions, and that's when you go out of business.
Exactly. Yeah. If you don't have that strategy, so I see a lot of all kinds of businesses. It's not just the security realm that didn't have that backup where they could continue on and without people showing up, or without being able to in person go out there and do the work. That's been a big struggle for a lot of businesses. And I'm wondering about, can these what once was a good security company that was providing a valuable service, but didn't have the strategy to keep going or the runway in front of them, acquiring those so that we can keep them going and kind of repurpose, getting out of COVID and coming out strong. Do you see any advantage to that?
Yes, I mean, the nice thing is one of the fastest growing job sectors, and one of the ones that every year go unfulfilled, are cybersecurity. So the good news is there is plenty of work for cybersecurity professionals. You might just have to be a little creative in doing that. And I even had to give advice to somebody who had a small company that they're very, very smart, but they didn't have the business mindset and probably shouldn't have started a business. But what I have them do now is they got a position at a company as an actual CISO, and it's a 1-year contract. And I did that and gave that advice because they needed to stabilize, that they needed to stabilize cash flow and basically get rid of all those expenses. So I'm like, you do need to close down your business and do this 1-year contract as a solopreneur. And then I gave them a roadmap that during that period, they're going to reinvent that business. They're going to start doing other things on the side, because the nice thing about a contract employee is typically there's no moonlighting clauses, so you can work on evenings and weekends. So now the idea is you're going to get 3 or 4 other clients and get that runway built. So in a year, you're going to have the savings, the runway, and the strategy, so then you can restart the business and build it out correctly.
Yes, great advice. Having that expertise and that level of education or experience definitely will take you a long way when you're starting a business in any fashion. Yeah. So, and there's lots of opportunity, especially in our cyber realm, where there is a great need for more people to be cybersecurity experts. I know back in 2019, I think we were expecting the number of need was at 1.5 million. And I think we missed that mark, and I think we've grown since then. I don't know how far we've grown, but probably somewhere between 1.5 and 2 million at this point, especially now that we have the work from home environment. And then I think I've heard you mention that we need around 5,000 virtual CISOs at that right now.
Yes.
Not in years from now, like right now.
Yeah. But the thing that makes it hard and challenging is if you look at the skill set that's needed to be a good security professional and the skill set that's needed to be a good entrepreneur, that there's very little overlap between them. So what I find happens sometimes is to be a very good security person, you typically have to be risk adverse, right? Because it's all about minimizing, reducing risk. You always want to have a solution that is successful, and you don't want to give up on a problem until you succeed. Right. Well, when you're an entrepreneur, you have to take risks. I mean, it's part of the nature. You have to do things. You have to recognize you're going to fail, and you have to recognize that sometimes you have to just let things go, write it as a failure and move on. And I find that sometimes those are sort of contradictory, and that's why people struggle. I do a lot of coaching, on vCISOs, and the number one issue I run across is they're like, but Eric, what if it doesn't go as planned? What if this doesn't happen? What if that doesn't happen? And I say, listen, it's not going to go as planned. And there are going to be failures, and you just have to adapt and adjust. And one of my favorite articles I just read this week that I thought was so interesting is Jeff Bezos came out and said when he left his job as a New York City investment banker and started Amazon, he told his friends and family that he thought it had less than a 30% chance of being successful.
Oh, wow.
Less than 30%. But here's the cool part about the story. The interviewer asked him, said, so what did you say when people said, okay, you just left this great job and you're going to start Amazon. What if it fails? If you think it has less than a 30% chance of succeeding, what are you going to do if it fails? And he says, I'll just try again. And I'll just keep trying until I find something that works. And I think that that's the advice that if we're cybersecurity vCISOs and want to start our own business, we have to recognize that whatever you think your company is going to look like in a year, it's not. And you just have to be willing to adapt, just, and recognize that if it doesn't work out, get back up and try again. Because the difference between succeeding in business and not is perseverance. It's not having the perfect plan.
Well, and that's why your business plan is never a permanent document. It's always a living, breathing, ever evolving, structure for your organization. Yeah. And the difference between being someone that works for an organization or an entrepreneur is the risk. Where does the risk fall?
Yeah.
So if you're up for a challenge, then maybe look into being an entrepreneur and starting your own security company. Yeah. And if you're risk adverse, then
yeah. But I even say that in this current day and age, that risk adverse mindset is an illusion, because the way I always grew up is my parents wanted me to work for a large company or the government. They wanted me to work for IBM or CIA because I would always have a stable job. Up or down economy, I'd always have a stable job, because the logic was when the company did really good, the company took all the profits and you got your salary. But when the company did really bad, they invested the profits back in and your salary stayed the same. Mm-hmm. So it was a very low risk. You always got a set salary. However, what we've seen last year and even this year with the COVID is that's not true. When these companies are making a lot of money, the executives buy more houses. And when the company loses money, they just lay off people. So this idea that you have a stable job is no longer true in 2020, because when things are good, you're not sharing in the profit. And when things are bad, you lose your job. So whether you face it or whether you want to face the reality or not, I'm really a big fan of getting technical security people to share in the profits and be their own boss, because I think it's a shame that you have all these brilliant security people that they're the ones that created the product, they created the content, they're the ones who created the business, and they're making a small salary. And then you bring in these MBAs that really know nothing about the business, and they're just flying the plane at 30,000 feet, and they're taking all the profits and all the abilities. Why is it in a company that the MBAs are making 3 million and the person that created the product is making 200K? That's right. Just, I mean, that to me is jacked up. So to me, take your product, take your profitability, and you get 100% as opposed to giving 80% to the MBAs.
Yeah. Well, and this is where you bring that.
Threats from MBAs whenever I say that.
I have an MBA. It's a minimal bank account.
Exactly. I love it.
I think that's where we need to look at the financials as well. If you're going to be a cybersecurity expert in any aspect, what do you know about that organization? So for example, if you work for a top 10, top 50 or Fortune 50 company, what is their profits? And I've seen where there's an organization that had, $5, $6, $7 billion in profit, meaning bills were paid, right? And this is what was left over, billions, and nobody got a bonus. Yeah. So you have to understand the company that you work for as well. And if you want to have that, kind of an income, what is it that your company is going to be doing for you? Because you're the one doing the work. Yeah. And then they own it. So that's something to keep in mind as well.
Yep, spot on.
Yeah, well, this has been a great, I don't even know how long we've been talking, but it's been a great conversation. I really appreciate you joining me today. And I look forward to being able to work with you and talk in the future as well. So you have—
It was my pleasure being on the show, and let's definitely stay in touch and continue to bounce ideas off each other.
Yeah, I think so. And you already have your contact information on the panel below you. Is there anything else you would like to say or tell our guests?
Just that I'm on a mission to make cyberspace a safe place to live, work, and raise a family, and we need to work together on this. So I put out a lot of free content. I give out a lot of free information. So please follow me on social media. And if I can help you in any way, shape, or form, please reach out to me either via the website or my email address at ecole@secure-anchor.com.
Yes, excellent. And you also offer a lot of educational material as well beyond all of that. So if you'd like to speak about the vCISO training or some of your cybersecurity training.
I'd love to, yes. So we have a vCISO course that you can go to secure-anchor.com. And this is giving you everything you need to be able to start, build, and run your vCISO business. So it's 6 hours, 2 days on the mindset and starting the business, 2 days on the marketing and sales, and 2 days on delivering of that vCISO, and that will help get you started. And then we're also working on some certifications and other coaching programs. So if we can help you or you're interested in becoming a vCISO, please reach out to us so we can get you more information.
Great, excellent. I think I have a cat in there tearing apart a shelf.
Yeah, yeah. I saw some animals going back there, so I'm like, I love it.
Oh my goodness, love working from home. Well, it was a pleasure. I want to thank you so much for joining me on Securing Everything. And again, I look forward to working with you in the future.
Sounds great, and thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for joining me on Securing Everything with my guest, Dr. Eric Cole. You can reach out to him on his webpage at www.secure-anchor.com. You can also reach him on his social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube at Dr. Eric Cole. That's DRERICCOLE, all one word. And you can also connect with him on LinkedIn at Eric Cole 1. That's ERICCOLE and the number 1. Be sure to connect with him. Check out his YouTube channel because he does provide a lot of information, a lot of educational material there and ready for you to start implementing your cybersecurity career right now. Thank you for joining me again on Securing Everything. I'm Dawn McCarty. Remember, it only takes one vulnerability to give it all away. So let's stay safe out there, everyone. Bye for now. We'll see you next time.